Truck drivers of Reddits, what is your most NSFW story from the road? Not a driver, but dispatch. One of the craziest stories we had was that there was a driver driving in the middle of the night and an owl went straight through the windshield. It ended up getting stuck in his chest. He was able to pull over and turn on his hazards. His body was found outside of the truck, which looked like he tried putting the emergency cones out. About 20 years ago I was heading down Snowshoe on I-80 in Pennsylvania. Flatbed passed me, and after he got about a 1/4 mile in front of me the brake lights came on and he started swerving all over, ended up in the median, upright but jackknifed into the driver's side. Turns out he hit a bear, which went through the windshield. Bear survived it and went on attack mode. I and 2 other drivers got to him in time to see this bear flipping out inside the cab attacking the guy. Right behind us was a state trooper. He ran up to the truck, yanked the passenger door open and shot the bear twice. Bear turned around and started towards him and he unloaded into it. That guy was tore the fuck up and no, he didn't make it. Watched a couple solicit a lizard, have a threesome in the truck, didn't see that part but we know when the truck is rockin', and pay her, hug her and send her on her way. A few times I've seen someone receiving roadhead, and once I had a convertible of college-age girls flash me their tits. But the funniest was a guy driving down the road with his topless girlfriend or wife. He was just holding a boob. He wasn't rubbing it, and they weren't doing anything else. He was just driving down the road holding a massive titty. My father-in-law's dad, grandfather-in-law, was driving through a pretty sketch part of New York in the 70s. He was in Vietnam and not the nicest human. I guess there was an area known for truckers getting robbed due to the slow-moving traffic. Just cut your lines and take your shit. He was driving through this area and a dude just hopped up on the steps of his cab. So since he was holding his .45, presumably for this reason, shot the dude point blank in the chest and just kept going. Somehow, nothing came of it. Pretty insane in my opinion. Not a truck driver but my dad was. Since he was a long-haul trucker we would go with him during summer break. So one late night in the plains of Oklahoma and on a very straight and very long run in the distance we could see tail lights switching back and forth, over and over again. We finally managed to catch up and Dad comes across the CB asking if we could pass. A lady comes over and says that we could. Well, apparently there was 3 trucks total. We passed the first truck and it was complete dark in the cab. We passed the second truck. Same thing. Complete darkness. We go to pass the lead truck and it's a woman driver with her titties out and playing with toys. I'm around 13 to 14 at the time. So needless to say I was happy. Well, the lady came back over the CB and asked if we enjoyed the show and wanted to know if we wanted to slow down for another view. Politely my dad said we enjoyed it but was behind. Apparently the 2 trucks in the back were taking turns swapping lanes to get a view. Used to assist in liability claims for trucking companies. What a nightmare. Best NSFW stories involved the multiple times truckers ended up in the back of their trucks trying to score with a lovely lady, who then proceeded to rob them blind and or steal the cab. We had 2 calls in 1 month involving truckers in Texas where the drivers were found naked in the back of their trucks with no wallets or ID at all. Police were calling us to identify them and figure out how to get them back on the road. One guy lost a full load from Circuit City because he thought it was his lucky day. Didn't matter how many times we warned the drivers or told the stories. SFW was the guy who stopped off at home en route to deliver a load. Found his wife with her boyfriend getting cozy. He walked back to the truck, put it in gear and parked it in their living room. No one died but try to explain to your insurance carrier how this was an accident. My dad's been a truck driver for over 30 years and his story he tells all the time is before the age of cell phones. He was running in the middle of the night and came up on a flipped vehicle. About that time a state trooper pulled up. The trooper and him followed bloody footprints through the desert trying to find the driver. They never found anyone. Another time it was a similar situation, but it was an extended van with a group of people and children. He had to help find the bodies in the dark that had been scattered from the van flipping. Watched a woman driving snort white powder off of a CD case with a kid in a car seat in the back. Tennessee. My dad's a truck driver. Called me really upset one morning about 7 years ago saying a girl my age, I was 16 then, was knocking on his window about 5:10 a.m., barefoot and obviously high. She had little to no teeth and didn't seem to have bathed in weeks. She was begging my dad to let her perform sexual services on him in exchange for like $10 US or something. It made him so upset that he bought her a hot chocolate and a sandwich, gave her his blanket from his truck and $50 and really hoped she wouldn't use it for drugs. I guess he thought of me when he saw her, I don't know. Really shook him. Didn't drive, but worked in safety for a large OTR company. Our e-log system had a camera option so drivers could take pictures during pre-trips or if they were involved in accidents. Had a driver quit and when we were getting the truck ready for someone else we discovered he had made the home screen of his e-log tablet a naked picture of someone he had in his truck. It was terrible. The worst part was we could not figure out how to change it back. I'm a little late to this party but this is a pretty interesting story. My mom was a truck driver for a little bit when I was just out of high school. I took a trip with her from Texas to Louisiana. Stopped at a truck stop outside Baton Rouge. We got approached by a prostitute. My mom said she wasn't interested because she wasn't gay. The prostitute said I'm both male and female, I have a vagina and penis. My mom being the curious sort she is asked how that was possible. They said I'm a real hermaphrodite. I was born with a working vagina and penis. My mom said she would give them $10 to see. They agreed. This person had a vaginal opening, testicles, and working penis. We ended up talking with them for about 30 minutes about hermaphroditism. It was pretty interesting conversation. Not a truck driver but the officer who responded to a semi versus passenger vehicle. Arrived on scene to a frantic scene. Multiple people are yelling and crying. I try to make sense of things and ask if anyone is injured. I hear the voice of a parent yelling out. If you have ever heard someone in person yelling for help with the fear and panic, you'll never see things the same way again. Medics arrive about the time I show up. They start to treat the lady who obviously has a broken leg. I start to make sense of things and get the driver of the semi. I ask if he needs medical, he says no. I go to the vehicles to get ID for the lady who is being combative and not cooperating. I get up to the vehicle where I'm looking for a purse. I look in the crumpled from behind car this lady was in. I see a laptop on the floorboard from what I can make out. Hear sounds of Blue's Clues playing but Joe video. I move the laptop and was not prepared for what I saw next. The top of the laptop was covered in brain matter and blood. An infant was on the floorboard folded up and mangled, skull obviously crushed. No car seat. Baby was around 2 years old. Placed either back seat with a laptop on their lap. The force from being hit from behind sent the baby into the driver's seat and laptop screen smushed the child's skull. I have 100% written child restraint law citations since then. I had just started working for a large corporate company. There was extra money to be made if your first truck, a recovery truck, someone quits and just leaves a truck somewhere, you get a ride with another driver and pick it up. This truck happened to be on the US/Canada line, at the inspection station. I see the truck sitting there, with this crate strapped to the back on the fifth wheel. It's maybe 4x6x3, which is odd. I go into the custom station. Tell them I am here to get the truck and show them my paperwork. The guy at the desk give me this "you poor fool" look, and says I hope you have a strong stomach, gives me the keys. I go to the truck and open the door. The smell of shit, and other human body odors, just about knocks me on my ass. This truck is a wreck inside. There's a pile of shit about 2 feet high against the side of sleeper. The mattress is just soaked with piss. One of cabinets was filled with shit. Turns out the last driver was busted when he tried to cross the border with the truck. Got stopped for an inspection. Needless to say, the smell tipped off the inspectors. The better things to list is they found 2 naked women tied up in the sleeper, a loaded 38 special, trafficable amounts of cocaine. Needless to say, he was locked up. The crate on the back of the truck was all his personal effect they were not keeping as evidence. I did not drive that truck back. I have no clue what they did with it. TLDR, tired to recover a truck for some extra cash. Turned out to be filled with human shit and piss, and was being used to traffic humans and drugs. My dad worked for a moving company and drove the big trucks across the country to wherever the person was moving to. Well, one time he was stopped at a red light and his moving partner hits his arm and says for him to look at something. He looks and this chick who was parked next to them at the red light had her legs propped up on the dash and was just rubbing her vag like a DJ who drank 20 Red Bulls. Once the light turned yellow for the other light, she just put her legs back down and drove off as soon as their light turned green. They were high up in a big ass truck so they saw everything. I'm technically not a truck driver, but I work for a company who does a lot of trucking. Last month we had a driver killed on the road because someone blew a red light. He swerved to miss them and rolled the truck, crushing him. Doesn't get much more horrific than that. Edit, Mr. Word. Work for a 3PL and we had to permanently ban one of our carriers because our customer found the team of drivers gang-banging a lot lizard as they were waiting to be unloaded. Apparently when they got caught, one of the drivers took off across the lot ass naked never to be seen again. I saw Lot Lizard empty her contents by hanging her ass out of a truck window, then move along to the next truck. I'm no truck driver but my father is. When I was young, maybe around 2, my dad was driving in Texas and it was real late. Drunk driver veered over into my father's lane and my dad could do nothing. Car hit head on with the semi and the semi demolished the car and the driver. Little extra bit. Don't drive drunk. Not exactly NSFW, not horrific but hilarious. My dad was a long-haul driver and was stopped for the night pretty close to where we live. My mom of course had gone to see him, so they had dinner, go back to the crowded parking lot, bumped uglies and probably conceived my brother. When my mom was going to leave, my dad waited until after she got out of the truck to hand her some money, making her look like a girl he picked up somewhere. Lots of me next. Coming from across the way. It's my favorite story and I probably told it more than they did. Edit, my most upvoted comment. Thanks guys. Nobody asked but even though they're weirdos, I'm really proud of them. My parents, https://m. Imager.com/hbevenbo. My friend's dad was apparently driving one day and a turkey fell out of a tree, broke through the window and he was just covered in blood, but he was apparently less than a mile from completing the delivery. Apparently they thought he killed someone before they saw the turkey. Driving northbound I-15 through Carjon Pass, I saw a really nice classic Buick parked on the side of the freeway with its hazards on, looked to have broke down. Upon closer inspection, an older woman had stopped, dropped her pants, hit the hazards and was dropping a massive deuce with her ass hanging out of the driver window. Different story, at the Flying J in Ehrenberg, I stopped for fuel and jerky. While I was walking in, I noticed a driver yelling at a recreational reptile to leave him alone and let him sleep, and this was the last time he was gonna tell her. So I did my shopping, and on my way back to start fueling I noticed the driver from earlier taking off from his spot and driving towards the Lot Lizard. I was thinking fucking great, I'm about to witness a murder and have to deal with taking statements and shit. Nope. Dude got his truck up to about 15 miles per hour, rolled the window down and whipped a jug of something I'm gonna guess wasn't lemonade at her and drilled her center mass. So this piss-soaked Lot Lizard goes sprinting into the travel center, and about 5 seconds later people started pouring out the front doors like the place was on fire. By the time I was done fueling, the cops had came and were tossing her in their cruiser while taking turns dry heaving. Best part is I was about 50 yards upwind of all this. Driving northbound in Utah heading to Brigham to deliver a load. Get past Ogden and it just starts downpouring like a Texas storm. It also happens to be 8 p.m. and pitch black out. Happened to roll by the scene of an accident where a gentleman was hanging out the driver's side window of a 90s Tacoma with a white sheet barely covering him and covered in blood, his head only half attached to his body. The tires of the truck were bald as shit, and given the pole that the truck was wrapped around, it's obvious what happened. Wear your seatbelt, people, and be safe. I don't want to see another semi-decapitation. Edit, rip inbox. Highest rated comment is about a dead guy. Beep boop. A trucker purposely hit my best friend's uncle while he was on a motorcycle. The trucker ran his pockets and took his ID and his plates and left him for dead on the road. Even though he was mangled beyond recognition, he was conscious, and he begged the trucker to leave some ID behind so his family wouldn't be left to wonder what happened. The trucker laughed and drove away. Somehow he survived, but he's paralyzed neck down. Oddly, my friend's father is also a trucker. The world's been cruel to that family. Driver here. I don't have any crazy stories other than old dudes beating off while driving and the standard boob flashes, but a buddy of mine stopped to take a nap and put his sun visor up at night to block the passing car lights. He saw lights flashing all around and figured it was more trucks pulling in behind him. Then he felt the cab moving and reminded himself he was in a windy area. About 4 minutes pass and he feels the cab moving again. Then he hears a faint tapping on his windshield. Remember, these windshields are fucking high. So he pulls down his sunshade, and to his horror, he sees a fully nude black dude about 4 foot 5 inches staring at him, just beating the shit out of his meat. He blew his air horn in the dude's face and he didn't even flinch. Which is fucking insane. Then the guy slid off the hood and ran off into the night. This was in the middle of nowhere. When he pulled back in later, he was white as a ghost, but definitely a good sport about it all. You could see the handprints on his hood. Creepy shit though. Not a truck driver, but I used to work at a truck stop, if that counts. Had tons of interactions with truckers and it's really made me appreciate what they do, but the stuff they pull sometimes is so damn gross. I once walked in on a waist-down naked truck driver washing his balls in the bathroom sink. I'm talking one leg propped up on the sink while splashing water repeatedly into his crotch. He paused for a second when I walked in, then kept going on with the splashing. I choose not to stick around. At least once a month I'd find a turd sitting in one of our urinals. Like I'm never going to understand the thought process of awkwardly shitting in a urinal when there's a perfectly good toilet a couple steps away. Had one of the local lizards lock herself in the bathroom and proceed to overdose on drugs. Me, being the key holder for the building, went to unlock the bathroom, and upon opening the door, the lizard fell out onto me and threw up all over my legs and feet. I don't even wanna imagine what the stomach contents of a truck driver's prostitute could contain, but needless to say I went home early that day. Threw away the pants and shoes too. My dad drove truck for the first 18 or so years of my life. I went with him a lot when I was a kid. Most gruesome thing I have ever seen was an accident where a semi hit a cow. Blood and guts fucking everywhere. The truck was pretty much demolished. No horror movie has even come close to as gory as that sight. Saw a guy get door checked by cops and he flew into a chain link fence. One of the cops jumped out of the moving car and started beating his ass. That was not a good part of St. Louis to be parked in overnight. My dad slept in the driver's seat with a Beretta on the dash that night. You'd be surprised how many men and women you see driving down the road in various stages of undress. You don't really notice it when you're in a car, but from a higher vantage point. Yeah. Also, I saw way more masturbating than roadhead. And yes, I learned to curse at an extremely young age. Heh, 3+ years of driving and I haven't seen anyone die or any lot lizards. It's boring and kinda nice. Thought I was going to see my first lot lizard last night for sure. Parked in a parking lot of a sex toy store for my 10-hour break. Sure enough, 30 minutes later some lady knocks on my door. So I roll down the window, kinda excited to tell her to fuck off, and she was just an employee that came out to tell me that they don't allow overnight parking. Frown. Dad is a trucker but based in England. He stopped to help out a fellow driver who was going up a hill later on in the snow, somewhere in Germany or France I forget. Out came the snow chains and started to put them on. The driver he was helping jumped into the cab to roll the truck and trailer forward, but my dad had his hand near the base of the tire and it went over his hand with the chain. The driver proceeded to fuck off, leaving my dad with a mangled hand. Thankfully he got help, nearly lost his thumb doing it too. Used to work as a freight broker. I had one carrier trucking company, whose dispatcher became somewhat of a good friend from all the work we did together, and frequently he'd assign this one charismatic, kinda hillbilly-ish driver on my loads, a nice break from the typically grumpy Eastern European who spoke no English and hated you for calling him. On one of said loads, driver picked up a lot lizard somewhere in the Carolinas. Typically these type of ladies don't spend too long in the cab, but seems driver guy had found himself somewhat of a gem as he started hauling with her in the cab everywhere. Days turned into weeks, into months, and despite how much he'd call her out for being an ugly slut when I was on the phone with him, they seemed like they had a good thing going. TL, doctor, it gets lonely out there. Get yourself a fuck buddy. It was the Friday before 4th of July weekend in 1995. I was going home for the weekend, heading south on I-81 in horrendous traffic, when suddenly a guy fell from the passenger door of the semi in front of me. The driver hit the brakes so hard he nearly jackknifed, and I came to a stop behind him. We ran to the man who fell and he was already blue, with blood coming from his nose and ears. Another person who had stopped jumped in and we attempted CPR. But when he blew into the guy's mouth, blood gushed out of his ears and we still couldn't get a pulse, so we knew he was gone. From what I could gather, the driver had just awakened him so they could swap out at the next truck stop in Winchester, VA, and for some reason he leaned against the door and it came open. I'll never forget the sight of him falling from the truck. You watch movies and the stuntmen do it so gracefully, falling and gently tumbling on the ground. When this man fell, he came out backwards and hit the ground head first, and then bounced violently into the air 2 or 3 times. I just remember thinking, I'm watching this man die. Not exactly a truck driver, but have spent a number of nights at truck stops from the age of 13 on, 32 now. I grew up drag racing, and back when I was younger, where me and my family loved it was minimum a 2.5-hour drive to the closest track, but we used to travel to a lot of tracks that would be over 5 hours away. This resulted in a lot of nights spent in truck stops, mostly with me sleeping in the back seat of the truck, bed of the truck, or in the trailer with the race car. A few quick stories of what I've seen. Naturally, a lot of lot lizards. They aren't as prominent as some think, but they are definitely out there. One night while sleeping in the bed of the truck, I overheard a truck driver arguing with an older woman over the cost of a blowjob. Apparently $40 was too much for this guy. This lasted for about 5 minutes until the woman left. About 5 minutes later, I hear the same guy talking to another guy I assume was a truck driver as well. He was telling this new guy about the woman wanting to charge him $40 for a blowjob. The guy then says something along the lines of, "Hell, I'll suck you off for half that." I assume the guy accepted that offer because I heard both of them hop into the cab of one of the trucks next to me. I was about 14 to 15 at the time. I was also propositioned by a mother-daughter team that looked to be 35 and 18 at most. I was about 16 to 17 at the time. There's other stories, but those are the only 2 that come to mind. Edit, I did not take the mother-daughter combo. I was about 16, all the money I had was spoken for in having to use it at the race, and also I was traveling with my stepdad and mother. Years ago there was a similar question on here, and this truck driver got on and proceeded to tell a tale of him witnessing one truck driver's pet chimp kick the shit out of another truck driver's pit bull. Not me, but my mom's friend's husband was a truck driver and was on the highway one night. He was driving along and sees a car pulled over to the side of the road, but doesn't think much of it since that's fairly common to see. Well, the door swings open and a guy jumps out in front of his truck and kills himself. My mom's friend ended up losing his job because of the guy, and it really fucked him up. So if you see a car pulled to the side, try and get in the far lane as soon as possible, not only for other people's safety but for yours as well. This may get buried, but my cousin's dad was murdered in a truck stop bathroom by his best friend. His throat was slit so severely he was nearly decapitated. Also his penis was cut off and put in his mouth. Pulled into a truck stop outside of Sacramento. Real dive. I just wanted some coffee and take a shit. As I'm walking through the lot, I see some sketchy looking homeless guy yelling at truckers demanding money. I decide to avoid the situation, cut between some trucks and circle around the store. About a minute or two later I hear a gunshot. The homeless guy shot a trucker in the head. 2 other guys tackled him and held him for the police. I always wonder if I hadn't decided to avoid him if that would have been me. Edit to everyone asking, I didn't see the name of the truck stop. It was south of Sac on 99. This happened in the mid-90s. It wasn't a big chain truck stop like Pilot, Petro, or Flying J. I was an OTR driver for the weirdest year of my life. Lot Lizard tried to get into the truck with my husband/driving partner Hole. I was in the back sleeping. We had heard you should be nice and park a specific way because otherwise they can unhook your trailer and you'll be ducked when you leave. Watched a large woman in the middle of arguing with the voices in her head have a full psychotic break and scare the shit out of a waitress. I have more, I'll be back. Story is from my brother. He was at a rest stop once and saw this middle-aged woman in a pink Jeep with 4 to 5 small dogs, walking them. He continued about his routine and got in his truck and back onto the freeway. A few minutes down the road the Jeep with the woman and her dogs goes flying past him, then suddenly makes a sharp left turn, hits the dirt median, and barrel rolls. He stops the truck and runs to check on her. There are dead dogs scattered all over. She is laying in a ditch of water with her head just above the water. She kept asking him incessantly if her dogs are okay. They were not. She was not okay either as she could not get up. Seeing a log truck driving while 4 logs were hanging out of the beams on the trailer, only being held by the wires. I'm just here for the Lot Lizard stories. Not a truck driver, but I do know someone who shot at a truck driver while driving down the interstate. The local drivers knew the guy and didn't like him because he would basically just record drivers doing illegal maneuvers and then sell the tapes to the companies. One day he claims that the truck driver saw him and tried running him off the road, so he pulled out a gun and shot right into the cab. He claimed self-defense in court, after firing from a moving vehicle, and even tried to get some of my friends to lie in court for him. They didn't, but he ended up doing about a year. I had a friend that used to drive trucks in Mexico. He would always keep a gun with him in case of robbers. He said it was the most terrifying job he's ever had. My dad is a truck driver, UK and European, and has been all my life. I used to go away with him during school holidays. I've spent a lot of my childhood in and around trucks and truck drivers, and I've pissed in lots of water bottles. When I was around 7 I went along during a rundown through France. To pass the time we were playing games such as Go Through the Alphabet and You Have to Think of a Boy's Name with that letter, and other games like Go Through the Alphabet and You Have to Think of a Girl's Name with that letter. The next thing I know we're in a small French town and stuck in a one-way system, unable to proceed due to the ever-narrowing road ahead. Dad stopped. He told people to move. He started to reverse. Then there was a bang. Dad got out of the truck. A crowd formed. I sat on the bed and ate sweets. Then the gendarmerie came. While reversing, my dad had accidentally gone through the front of a salon. I remember the policeman motioning my dad to pull forward and my dad motioning and saying something offensive in trucker English. Then I heard another crash. I'm sure a camera crew turned up at this point. When we pulled forward, the brick and glass, being held up by the trailer, all fell down and landed on top of the gendarme's motorbike. Then we had to follow the police to a car park and get in their car. I remember they were armed, and because my dad's a trucker, red asshole, he told me not to worry because if I cried then they would shoot us. I cried a lot, for hours. And apparently that's why they let us go with just a fine. I also got a huge pack of stickers and all the sweets they could find. TL, Dr. Dad trashed a French salon and ruined a gendarme's bike, and me being 7 and wailing like a banshee got us off scot-free. Girlfriend's daddies was propositioned by a very dark-skinned black dude that surprised him at a VT rest stop middle of the night. Guy tries to get him to fuck him in the bushes by his truck and he refuses and goes to use the bathroom. When he gets back in his truck, the first thing he saw when he turned on his headlights was a shiny black ass shaking at him from the bushes to proposition him. He drove away and the guy came out yelling something at him, presumably for not sticking it in a random ass shaking at him from the bushes. Apparently it's pretty common in some of the rest stops around here to have that shit happen. Got a tire changed at a truck stop late at night by a guy that had a speech impediment. Stopped by the same truck stop a few nights later to use the restroom. Sit down and could hear someone in the stall next to me jacking it. 2 seconds later I hear his co-worker on a two-way radio asking where did he go. He radios back he is on break, then gets back to his business. Had that same unique voice from a couple nights earlier. Another one is from my dad, who is also a truck driver. He was parked outside a milk plant in Dallas with like 7 other trucks. He was woke up at like 2 a.m. with someone banging on his door. The guy had a gun holding a girl hostage, saying he will shoot her if he doesn't open the door. He ignored it and they gave up, then they casually walked to the next truck together and try it again. While in stop and go traffic on I-80 East just after 4 a.m., I looked down at the car on my left and a chick was giving a guy blowjob. A mile or so later, traffic was merging to the right because of an accident. 3 lanes were bottlenecking into the 4th lane because an SUV flipped over. 2 bodies were covered by white sheets with pools of blood surrounding them. From what I found out later was that once the SUV flipped, didn't say how, but there was another car involved. The 2 people inside crawled out of the SUV and then were ran over by passing cars. Edit, found the much more detailed news article about what actually happened. This was back in February of this year, so my memory is a little off. https://www.google.com/amp/s/www. Chicago Tribune. com/suburbs/post-tribune/crime/ctptb Interstate Fatal Crash Charge SDO22820180227 Story, AMP. HTML. Not necessarily NSFW, but still pretty gruesome. My dad started driving in the 70s and has always had great and hilarious stories to tell, but never been much of a serious talker. No matter what I was going through, he hated hearing about any sort of emotion. One night I had confessed to my ma it was pretty tough getting through to him, that he seemed immune to serious conversation. She proceeded to tell me this story, hoping it'd clear some things up. These 2 kids had gotten into a wreck somewhere on the highway. One friend pulled the other out of the car and put him on the road while going to get help. As the one friend was going to get help, the kid on the road got hit a second time by a different vehicle, but the kid was still alive. So while my dad was driving, he saw this kid, just lying there in the middle of the road. Dad pulled over, got out and held him until he stopped breathing. Mom said it really messed him up for a long time, and that he never really got over it. I always looked at my dad a bit differently after hearing that. He was only about 21 years old when that had happened to him, and I think it had a major impact on him. Edit, thank you for the silver. Have spent years on Reddit without a single comment blowing up, so I appreciate y'all. Some of the best and worst things that ever happened in my dad's life were while he was on the road. But he's still driving to this day as a means of providing. There's always been something about being on the road. It's like being the needle that grinds grooves of a record. All you great truckers out there, keep on trucking. I had a lot lizard drop her false teeth on my junk. Really killed the mood. This is nothing NSFW, but it involves a trucker. I remember taking a peek at my uncle's paycheck back in 1993, and that fucker was clearing $2,500 a week. Obligatory not a trucker driver, but my aunt was for 20 years. She has multiple stories, but I think the one that stuck with me was when she and her partner were on a haul and happened upon a wreck involving a semi. They get out to check on the passengers. Family of 4. Mom and dad were decapitated. 6-year-old and an 18-month-old in the back. Reasonably unharmed. They pull out the older child and went to retrieve the baby. Well, for whatever reason the baby had come loose out of the car seat and was stuffed up underneath the driver's seat. Emergency services were on the way, but the car was leaking gas and there was already a small fire. They couldn't wait. Her partner had broken the legs of that baby in order to free it from the car. Once they had them both safely away from the vehicle, partner set the let's with some branches and his belt. About 20 minutes later emergency services arrived and the car was engulfed. They put it out and salvaged the remains, but had they waited that baby would be dead. EMS checked them both out. Partner was former military medic and knew how to set a brake. The shitty part of this story is that the family of the deceased took them to court because they didn't feel it was necessary to break that baby's legs. Undue harm, etc. But the court determined that it was the right course of action. Yay, Good Samaritan laws. So they didn't get in trouble. But still shitty. Edit, words are hard. Sometimes I get a hankering for chicken fried steak when I'm on the road. Everybody knows that if you want a good chicken fried steak, you head to a truck stop with a single word on the sign out front. Eats, restaurant, Mom's, something like that. If it doesn't have a counter that you can belly up to without waiting for the hostess, keep driving. Just after I sat, a lady somewhere around 40 years young, who looked the far end of a very rough 50, sat next to me. She was easy to talk to, so we talked. She'd been out on the loop for 5 days. That is the term she used, she might have made it up, for going out to a truck stop and servicing truckers. She told me when she was done for the day, she'd give a freebie if they'd let her sleep in the back and wake up in a fresh new lot. Good way to see the country, she told me. I doubted her but didn't say so. She was proud of the fact she'd never been robbed of cash in 20 years. Said a few had tried, but almost all of them backed off when she introduced them to Millie. I only saw the mother of pearl handle of Millie when she tapped the top of the stiletto peeking out of the top of her calf-high boot. Almost all she repeated with a toothless grin. She hated immigrants that came to this country and undercut hard-working Americans. Used to take her only 3 days a month to keep her in luxury, which she pronounced luxury. Now it was almost a week twice a month, because the immigrants would undercut hard-working Americans. I couldn't discern which nationality these immigrants were. She hinted they could be Hispanic, Asian, or Eastern European. Perhaps all three. She said if I was heading east that she'd make it worth my while, with a wink. Sadly I told her I was heading west. She asked if I'd make a little detour to help her out. I asked how far she was going. Omaha, she said. We were in Ely, Nevada at the time. When I again said no, she gathered up her oversized handbag, joined a portly man in a dirty ball cap, greeted him with a hug, and disappeared out of my life forever. The first time my husband and I had sex in the sleeper he told me I was now trucker trash. Driver here, seen a few wild lizards in a few places but by far not the worst. The most fucked up thing I ever seen involved another driver. It was one of those long lonely nights driving through New Mexico on I-10. My truck at the time only did 65 miles per hour, speed limits 75 to 80, so I'm just hanging out in the slow lane driving my life away. I see headlights in my mirrors and they are coming up fast from a distance. Nothing out of the ordinary, people fly out there when they can. But when the truck gets up beside me it suddenly matches my speed. Confused I looked over at the driver. He was every bit of 350 pounds, butt naked, had all his cab lights on and was furiously fapping. The worst part was the eye contact. He locked eyes with me, stared through my soul, and came on his steering wheel. I was so shocked, and it's sick to say but mildly impressed with the timing. I hit the brakes and he hit the gas. I was left so sick and confused. My stepdad was following a tank truck one night, and he saw a deer jump from the side of the highway and hit the tank of the truck. Apparently it damn near just obliterated it, almost a mist of blood/guts. Trucker here. I was at a truck stop outside Los Angeles, walking in with my co-driver for a shower. A fairly attractive lot lizard walks up to me with a cheesy grin and asked if I had any change. I dug deep in my pocket and pulled out a week's worth of change. It was probably $5 or $6 worth, mostly nickels, dimes, and pennies. She stood there dumbfounded as I walked off. My friend said, "You know that was a hooker, right?" I replied, "Yep." He said, "You know she didn't want change, right?" I said, "I know. She didn't have any pockets, and I wanted to know where she was going to put it. I never found out. She stood there clutching it with both hands." Not a driver, but Teamsters union drivers reported to me. In the office 4:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Boss walks out of his office and tells me my new hire is at the back lot of a strip club getting a BJ in the empty bay of a side loader beer truck. Before he can finish, another call comes in. Dumbass had parked in full view of the intersection of two main interstates. I grab a warehouse guy to drive the truck back and go. When we get to the club, he'd spent close to $500 and was shit-faced. Gave him the option to come back and get fired or just give up the keys and go away. He took the latter and ordered another beer. Wasn't even a brand we sold. He still works in the business, but quit drinking. Still doesn't give a fuck. This happened to my dad in the late 70s. A cold February morning in Nebraska, my dad was transporting a cattle trailer a couple hundred miles. He left in the morning and it had snowed slightly the night before, so the roads were just about completely empty. Anyways, into the trip he needed to stop to use the restroom, so at the next rest stop he pulled in. He didn't notice any vehicles at the rest stop when he pulled in. So my dad is on the toilet taking a shit when he hears someone walking close by. Then all of a sudden he describes an albino male with a giant red afro slide his head under the bathroom stall and says hi. My dad pulls up his pants and storms out of the stall when he sees another man trying to block the bathroom exit with a cane. My dad runs right through the guy, knocks him down, gets in his truck and hauls ass out of the place. I passed an accident on I-240 in Memphis a few years ago. My dad was in my passenger seat, and we were in the northbound lanes. In the southbound lane, pressed against the divider, was a white Ford F-150, and about 6 police cars behind it. The Ford was smashed to shit. As we got closer to the accident, I noticed a body hanging out of the driver's window, covered in a blanket. The arms stretched out from under the blanket, and blood was smeared along the side of the white truck. It was a miserable scene. My dad was messing with his phone at the time, and he noticed me slow down slightly as we passed the wreck. As he started to look up, I said, "No. Don't look, Dad." But it was too late. He saw the body and the blood, and we drove in silence the whole way home. It was a somber experience. Neither of us talked about it ever again. Wear your fucking seatbelts, people. Not a trucker, but I dated a girl who was. She was short haul, but occasionally had to run loads to a warehouse out of state. When she did, I usually tagged along. We pulled into this nasty, abandoned-looking truck stop right on the New Mexico-Texas border for fuel. All fueled up, we headed inside to see if we could get something to eat. The inside of this place looked like something out of Fallout. Mostly empty shelves with random dust-covered canned goods and old boxes of this or that. Lights flickering and making that pinging sound. Not a soul to be found. We grabbed a few bags of chips and waited near the register. After making some noise and waiting for like 5 minutes, we put the stuff back and went outside. Surrounding her truck were about 10 guys who looked pretty fucking scary. Remembering I had left my gun in the truck, my stomach dropped. A biker then rolls up and talks to the 2 guys near the back of the truck for a minute, then does the slitting throat motion. My girlfriend is shaking and close to crying. I'm pretty sure I've already shit my pants. The biker throws his hands up, tells everyone to move, and walks over to us. He then very politely tells us that someone had stolen a trailer of his up north and he was looking for it. This wasn't the one, so he apologized for the drama. He reaches into his pocket, grabs something, sticks it in my hand, and tells me he was sorry for the trouble. As he's walking away, I look in my hand and it's a bag of weed. We got the fuck out of there pretty fast. Good fucking weed though. We were joking about trying to find him on the way back and getting some more. Flat tires. Not safe at all. You guys ever hear of Large Marge. I am one of the elusive female long-haul drivers. The number of times I have been invited to share a shower with total strangers is disturbing. But the absolute worst I ever heard was in a truck stop in Florida. I got out to fuel, and had been running hard, so I had a bandana on and my hair in pigtails. I finished fueling and jumped in to pull forward to go get my receipt and turned on my truck. Overheard two guys talking about how they were going to grab me by my pigtails and ran me hard from behind. I opted to not stay at that truck stop that night, and went to another one for my shower, laundry and for the night. Mom was a truck driver in the 90s. She was driving and saw some guy in a red convertible fly past her, way over the speed limit, receiving a blowjob from his passenger. It wasn't long before news hit the radios that some dude was going east receiving a blowjob. Truckers were laughing at it. Eventually, one of the truckers had heard about it and decided to put a stop to this. She sees the guy coming up in her mirror, rolls down the window, opens a bottle of Gatorade and doused the two lovebirds with the sports drink. Sports car guy flips off the truckers and speeds away. Edit, bonus story. Mom told me once of my father, who she drove with, team drivers, berating a lot lizard after she knocked on the door to offer services during the early hours of the morning. He was not amused to lose sleep because a hooker wanted money. Plus, his wife was in the bunk, so they were both sleeping when the knocking woke them up. My dad has seen a lot of shit in years of driving, but one really messed him up. Night driving and the car in front of him is swerving all over, obviously drunk. He calls it in, but before the cops can get there the guy drives off the road headfirst into a tree. My dad pulls over and tries to help. The driver is unconscious, but the girl in the passenger seat is awake and screaming for him to help. The car was so mangled he couldn't get her out on his own. Then it caught on fire. He had an extinguisher in his truck, but it was too much too fast. He listened to this girl scream as she burned alive until the screams stopped. The girl was around the same age as me, and in his nightmares it was me in the car that he couldn't save. He would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, "I tried to save her but I couldn't," and just start uncontrollably sobbing. He eventually had to go to therapy over it. He's better now and still drives, but I know it's still with him. Don't drink and drive, people. You're fucking up more than your own life. My uncle has been driving trucks for over 40 years. About 20 years ago he was hauling molten aluminium to a Honda plant in Ohio in the middle of the night. He was behind another truck that wasn't going quite as fast as him, but instead of passing him he decided to drop in behind the guy and run for a while. About 30 miles up the road a truck going the opposite direction crossed the center median and hit the truck in front of my uncle head on. My uncle was just barely able to get his truck stopped before running into the back of the guy he had just been following. The truck that crossed the center median burst into flames on impact. My uncle ran out and tried to put the fire out with his extinguisher, but it was like throwing a cup of water on a bonfire. The other truck driver had been ejected and my uncle couldn't find his body to see if he was alive or not. It took the first responders a while to find the guy's body and even longer to find his head. It messed my uncle up pretty bad for a while. My old WoW guild had a truck driver in our ranks. He carried a full PC in his truck and connected over wireless at truck stops to raid. We were raiding the day the verdict was released at the last Michael Jackson trial. As we played, he was giving us regular updates of some truckers fighting outside his truck over the verdict. The fight kept escalating, stuff thrown, fists used, knives pulled. Finally he just piped up in voice chat, "Oh shit, gotta go, fill you in later," and went offline. About 30 minutes later he comes back. Apparently the fighting truckers decided to pull guns on each other, so he decided to GTFO and head inside the stop. Edit, since this blew up, maybe some old guild mates would see this. Tug on server Garona. For the Horde. My grandfather was a state trooper and a detective/accident detective. I have two interesting truck stories from him. He told of a group of college kids driving somewhere for spring break and being distracted one way or another, they hit a semi. He said when he showed up, 3 of them were out of the car and 1 was still sitting in the back, behind the passenger. The roof of the car had been pretty well peeled back, with most of the damage being on the passenger side of the car. The passenger's shoulder was fucked up from the crash and everyone was sobbing, so no one was really being cooperative when my grandfather asked about the 4th individual. My grandfather walked up to the car to see if the 4th guy needed any help. He said from behind and on the left he looked fine, but when he got around to the front, the whole right of the guy's head was just destroyed. When I was younger I was helping my grandfather move his old police filing cabinets and I was kinda digging through his old photos and files and I stumbled across some guy, clearly dead, laying on the road. It was pretty gruesome. I inquired about the photo and he said the trucker had fallen asleep and fallen out of his truck and ran himself over, cutting himself in half. It was in the middle of the winter so he froze to the ground. My grandfather said they had to pretty much scrape him off the ground. So I'm not a trucker but my father was, and when I was 13 I went on a short run with him over a weekend. We were on I-95 somewhere near Benson, North Carolina and stopped at a truck stop. I can't remember which one. He went in and I stayed in the truck. Across the lot I saw what I think was a woman but could have been a man with long hair or wearing a wig knock on another trucker's door. He opened it, she then stood on the tank steps to the side, and stayed there for a few minutes having small talk. After a few minutes I saw their head dip below the door window. Their head disappeared from view for about a minute and then they jumped off the steps and walked away. I didn't really understand it at the time, but as an adult I realize now I watched a man in a truck get a blowjob in a truck stop parking lot. I used to drive a consistent delivery route into Cleveland, Ohio. During the Thursday AM commuter traffic I'd pass a grey Honda doing 3 to 4 under the speed limit in the slow lane. I guess he was being extra careful because driving and beating your dick like it owes you money is serious multitasking. Saw this 3 times one summer. For the local curious, it was between 252nd and 117th eastbound on 90. Another time I was stuck at the 271-480 split in gridlock, and this big SUV is next to me. As it rolls past I see a mostly topless chick going to town on this dude. He makes eye contact as we pass, grins and gives me a big thumbs up. I laid on the air horn, and next thing you know topless chick pops out of the sunroof and waves, in all her topless glory. Good times. Brother-in-law had a lot lizard sneak in his truck and when he found her and kicked her out she hurled poop into his passenger window. Like she pooped on command and threw that shit on a whim. I'm not a truck driver but I heard a crazy story from a buddy of mine when we were really young. There is one large truck stop in the city that we live in and we were getting our driver's licenses and had to do on-the-road training with a driving instructor. The city is small enough that the instructors know a lot of the police in town and as my buddy drove past the truck stop they noticed a ton of police cars and EMS vehicles. They stopped to say hello to the police and one of them informed the driver's ed instructor that a driver got drunk and asked if they could show the kids what happens to people who drink around heavy machinery. He told me that a driver got royally messed up on booze and passed out behind a semi and as the driver backed up in the morning he squashed the drunk's head like a watermelon and had no clue about the entire ordeal until he was far enough out of his spot to see what he had done. Crazy. My dad told me he went blind in a blizzard for 10 seconds on the highway while going over 100 kilometers per hour and carrying about 140,000 pounds worth of cement. He's been driving big trucks across North America for over 30 years and he tells me this is his most frightening moment. I'll suck your dick for a cheeseburger. Not a truck driver, but I worked around Greyhound buses a long time ago. That comment has stuck with me to this day. My dad told me this story when he was a trucker based out of Mexico some 30 years ago, long before I was born. He was in a hurry one night to get to his destination, I think somewhere in South America. He and a friend of his from his pueblo who needed a ride to the city he was going to were driving along at like 3 a.m. when up ahead in the road there was what looked like a woman lying down in the road. My dad, being the naive 18-year-old that he was, began to stop. He told me that as he slowed down, his friend put his hand on his shoulder, and gave him the most terrified look he has ever seen and said drive. Took my dad a second, and before he knew it his friend was shouting go go go, and my dad just floored it. When he floored it, the woman shot right up and dove out of the way. As he was driving away, he looked in the rearview mirror and something like a crowd of 10+ people were standing in the road, watching them drive off. This sounds like a classic movie trope, and I'm like 90% sure I've seen this in a video game somewhere. He told me this story like 10 years ago when we were driving from LA to Chicago at 12 AM lol. Well, not NSFW, more on the funny side. I traveled down the Autobahn at around 80 km/h approaching a construction site where the two lanes became one. A car driver decided it was smart to cut in front of me, leaving me with an emergency brake. You could see my tire marks still weeks later. It's not uncommon. I raged a bit and didn't expect to see this guy again. So I left the Autobahn and approached a traffic light, and, well, guess who stopped there right in front of me? You guessed it. As I was still kinda pissed about this dangerous situation, I jumped out of my truck, approached the car and knocked on his window. I just wanted to inform him how close it was and how dangerous it was. The moment I knocked, this guy went apeshit in the car, and I quickly realized that this guy will certainly go after me now. I stepped back and tried to get back to my truck, because this guy was just about to beat the shit out of me. He was full dead on in rage mode. Guy slams open his door, jumps out of the car and comes after me. I looked past my shoulder and saw him chasing me down. Unfortunately, he was driving a quite brand new automatic car, company owned, with company logos on. While I was looking back at him, I saw his car slowly rolling forward. Guess who forgot to put it on P? In that moment I just started laughing, and this dude realized something is going on. He saw his car rolling away, and he tried to stop it while jumping back in. Unfortunately for him, the moment he jumped in, he hit the car in front of him. I quickly returned in my truck and drove past him, still laughing. I still wonder how he explained that one to the police and his insurance. I drove past the location 30 minutes later and saw him arguing with the cops. A friend of mine from high school named Keelan had a weird run-in with a truck driver. He was walking back from a friend's house along this decently heavy traffic road. It started pouring really hard and he still had like 15 to 20 minutes more of walking to go, so he just lifted his shirt over his head to shield the rain a bit. This truck sort of like this one sees him and pulls over and yells out to him if he wanted a ride to get out of the rain. He accepts and gets into the truck and starts guiding him where he needs to go. The drive wasn't going to be very long, but from the get-go the driver made things a little uneasy for him. He had a worried feeling at the bottom of his stomach, so he decided to tell him to stop about 5 blocks from his house so he wouldn't know exactly where he lives. Keelan thanks the man, and as he's getting out the driver blurts out, "Hey, would you like a blowjob before you go?" Keelan was completely shocked by that, but he was also an extremely nice and polite guy, so he just says, "Thanks, but I'm okay." The driver replies by saying, "That's fine. You're a good-looking guy and just thought I'd ask." He got out of the truck and walked slowly in the rain to make sure he was gone before heading to his house. It was such a bizarre moment, but Keelan was glad this guy wasn't like super aggressive and tried to force him to do something, since he was a pretty scrawny guy. After that he decided to never take a ride from a stranger again in case the next person wasn't as polite as that guy. I've seen a lady stick her ass out a window at 3 AM going 60 to take a shit. It's not really NSFW, but my dad was a truck driver before I was born and my entire childhood life. One day I asked my parents how they met. Apparently in 1990, my mom had an old CB radio in her car. She would ask for traffic updates driving through Chicago. My dad was flirting with her over the damn thing and somehow convinced her to meet at a rest area and have dinner. She agreed. They probably had sex. This continued, and within a year she found out she was pregnant by a trucker, me and my twin brother. TL, Dr. My mom was probably a rest area lot lizard. I'm a truck mechanic. At my old shop, these two Russians came in with a sleeper cab tractor trailer with a shifting problem. My foreman got in the truck and suspected a clutch, so they pulled it in. When someone went under, they noticed an awful smell. Turns out these guys cut a hole in floor of the cab to take a shit in order to decrease stops. Good in theory, however the hole was directly above the drive shaft U-joint, therefore slinging shit everywhere underneath. Was in the TA Seattle a few months ago. A variety of truckers on the CB were talking about how they like to beat and strangle lot lizards. Pretty awful stuff. You can also go into any truck stop and turn on your CB and will hear horrible racist rants. Some people say some pretty horrific stuff like it's nothing. My dad was a long-haul trucker for 10 years. He, like most truckers, would often stop at Flying J truck stops to shower, eat and get a few hours of sleep. Turns out, Flying J's are hot spots for the grossest hookers in the world who would jump from truck to truck servicing these dudes. The grossest story he told me was one time he was hanging out in the cab and he sees a hooker go into one of the other trucks. About 15 minutes later she gets out, starts waddling to another cab, but then stops halfway between the trucks, squats over a dirty, oily, gross gas station puddle, splashes her vagina with the disgusting water and then proceeds to climb into the next truck. Edit, apparently they're known as lot lizards. TLDR, lot lizard washed her used snatch with gas station puddle water before throwing it out again. Edit 2, apparently this happens more than I thought. Not my story but a good friend's. He was fairly new to the job, and I'm not 100% sure how it works, but I know he was in a company truck that other drivers have used. No big deal, it was clean, reliable, and he got paid. Well, he had this particular truck for a good week or two. He kept hearing something rattling around in the glove box, but seeing as it wasn't his truck, and he wasn't particularly overly curious about it, he just ignored it. Well, his tour ends, and he's driving it back, and that thing in the glove box starts making more noise, like a constant, vibrating noise. He opens it up and out plops a silver butt plug on the floor of his cab. Starts rolling all around and he's clearly disgusted and disturbed. He didn't want to touch it, so I think he said he found a broom and just pushed it out into the street for some other poor bastard to find. It just makes me laugh that he was traveling the country with some stranger's sex toy maybe 5 feet away from him. Scene fights, a lot lizards jumping on your truck and shaking it. I have rolled up on some deadly wrecks before, but the craziest thing I've witnessed was in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was coming off on the exit to the drop yard for my load, and a dude high as a kite was screeching loudly. The man jumped on the truck and did the hand motion for feed me while rocking the truck. I was pretty calm, but he wouldn't get off with me yelling, so I rolled down the window halfway and threw the cans of soda and water bottles I had in the cooler at him. One of the cans hit him in the head, but I don't really think it did anything to him. In the end, I think he got what he wanted, I guess, something to drink. Not a trucker, but I was recently driving behind a rig without a trailer through the Appalachians. This guy fired a full-gallon milk jug of piss out the passenger window. Then another one. And another. I watched this guy throw out 12 trucker bombs, each a gallon jug full of piss out the side window. I was disgusted, but amazed that this seeming behemoth of a man could navigate the winding road while just launching full-gallon jugs way out of the cab. I tried to throw a banana peel out the window the other day and it made it like 2 feet. God bless you, King Piss Jug. I guess it's just the way of the road, fellas. TL, Dr. At and y'all ain't gon' see this comment, but oh well, I tried. I pulled into a really shitty Flying J truck stop in Houston last summer at about 2 to 3 a.m. and got the last spot on the lot. Houston is a complete shithole to begin with, but all the lowlifes seem to congregate at these truck stops. I got super lucky with this spot also because I could drive nose into it instead of backing up into it, and it butted up to a fence. The reason nosing up to a fence is good is because it's darker and you are farther away from the running diesel engines of other trucks. I should note that my truck would not just idle all night as it had a cut-off system regulated by a thermostat in my sleeper. It turned on if it got too hot and turned back off when it got the temp back to whatever I set it at. Houston summer nights can be as bad as days because it is so damn humid. I woke up not even an hour later and I am drenched in sweat with my thermo reading somewhere in the low 90s WTF. When I got into my driver's seat, my instrument cluster was throwing codes and flashing lights. Oh shit, a crucial fluid is empty, so the engine shut down to avoid damage. WTF, I filled it the day before and it lasts about 5 to 6 miles between fills. That's unusual. And then she caught my eye. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. Fair Aphrodite held no compare. Just kidding, she was a wrecked out reamed out lot junkie with track marks a mile long, I assume. She came out of the space between my tractor and trailer and walked up to my door and knocked on my door. She gave the same preamble they all do about needing money, except she said she needed exactly $7 and she was willing to work for it. I said no and fuck off. What the fuck are you doing back there? She rambles our guy but lowers the amount needed to $2 and she is still willing to work for it. Still no, except I grabbed a handful of laundry quarters and threw them out my window. She skittered off into the night chasing them under trailers and I turned my truck on and off. Well shit, everything is fine it appears, as fluid levels are good in here and no kill codes on display. WTF. I put my handgun in my pocket and grab a flashlight after making sure she is gone to step out and manually check my fluids and cargo. Okay, fluids are good and my cargo is still there, so what the fuck was that about? I go between my tractor and trailer and see nothing until the smell hits me and I look down to see corn and other bits mixed into some kinda dark sludge. Fuck, that's diarrhea. TL, doctor, my truck freaks out and turns off at 3 AM in a shitty Houston truck stop. I wake up and see a problem when a lot lizard comes out from between my tractor and trailer gap. She propositions me for $7 then $2 when I threw shiny coins to distract her. Turns out it was a glitch and she wasn't stealing fluids back there, she was leaving some chocolate butt sauce, extra sloppy. I'm sure this is commonplace, but it shouldn't be. My aunt pulled into a truck stop one night and another trucker tried to get way too handsy. She was lucky enough to be in arm's reach of her tire mallet and knocked the fucker in the skull with it. Don't be rapers, people. Simple stuff. Either that or get your head smashed. Not really NSFW and not my story, but my buddy's girlfriend's parents own a trucking business and one of their drivers never showed to his stop and they couldn't get a hold of his phone, so they looked at the tracker on the truck and he was at a truck stop in California. They called the police there and they went to check it out. He had been robbed and shot in the process while parked overnight. The worst part was that it was his second to last run before he retired. The owners of the company knew him well and felt terrible because he didn't want that job, but they gave it to him anyway. I drive a beer truck for work. One of my fellow delivery drivers was talking to me on the phone and forgot to shut a bay door on the side and lost a 1/8 log of beer when taking a corner. I told him he should circle back and pick it up and he said screw that shit, just kept rolling because it didn't hit anything and just bounced into someone's lawn. I warned him he may get into trouble if someone saw and told the homeowner and they call up the shop. My buddy's response was simply, what would you do if you found a cold keg of beer on your front lawn? Answering his own question before I could get there, he said, you drag that fucker inside ASAP and you don't tell anyone. Seems like he was correct because he never heard anything about it. Was a safety manager for the largest oil company in the US. Had a female driver that fucked up her truck hitting a cow in Georgia. She used one of our other trucks on the yard till hers got out of the body shop. Time came for her to move back to her truck, and she forgot something. I get a call from her asking to get a toy out of her loaner truck. I'm thinking no big deal, she had a dog, just a dog toy. I look in the truck and can't find shit. I call her and ask her where TF she put it and what it looks like. She says it's just a black toy, so I asked, a black dog toy? No, a toy for me. One that vibrates. My jaw dropped. No way in fucking hell did I get paid enough to look for a black dildo in a big rig. The terminal manager got back from a lunch. Really nice Mormon guy. I tell him he's getting the dildo, not me. Hour later he found it, carried it into the terminal and threw it on her dispatcher's desk. Everyone is laughing their asses off, and the nasty fuck turned it on and smelled it. I'm a bus driver. It seems we're like truck drivers' innocent little sister because none of this happens to us. My grandfather once went on a business trip to Syria, he's from Lebanon, with his truck. As he was coming back from Syria and still on the Syrian border and close to the Lebanese border, he fell asleep on the road while driving his truck. All of a sudden his Syrian guide on the passenger seat starts screaming because my grandfather killed a pack of sheep and killed over 100 of them. The Syrian guide starts freaking out and shouts in Arabic, "They're gonna kill us. Get the fuck out of here before we get caught." My grandfather's truck was littered with dead sheep all over. As the story goes, my grandfather gets caught just as he was about to enter the Lebanese border, and the local Syrian ambassador demanded that he'd have to pay for each one, and so my grandfather did. The shepherd then wanted all the dead sheep on the truck to take back home, but my grandfather said that he paid for them so they're his. When my grandfather went back to his village, he sold all the sheep to butchers. The shepherd made a shit ton of money that day, and thankfully my grandfather returned home with his head. I was driving on Interstate 5 in the Central Valley of California around 4 a.m. in complete darkness. I was heading south, I think, and in the northbound lane I saw the single headlight of someone on a motorcycle. There was a 50-foot dirt median and the northbound lane was much higher up and hugging the foothills. There was a bend where our paths crossed. The motorcyclist seemed to be asleep and just continued heading straight. In my rear view mirror I saw headlights flipping over and over. I called it in on the CB but to this day am not sure what I saw. When I was in my 3-week training period in a large OTR, my trainer was black and we had bunk beds struck. I would drive my 10 hours shift, while he slept, vice versa. When we would drive through the inspection entry points in Oregon or Wyoming he would have me drive because I am white. He was afraid of racial profiling. It is sad but true. It was faster getting through scale houses if I was behind the wheel. Never talked to the truck driver, but I was delivering newspapers in the morning, when I come up to a street that's blocked off by the police. They inform me a total of 0.7 miles of road is closed off due to an accident. I learned later that in the middle of the night, a college girl was riding her bike without any lights on, and a truck driver didn't see her. He also didn't notice when he ran over her, so he ended up dragging her body to where he was going. The police had blocked off 0.7 miles of road because it was littered with body parts. Does a tour bus count? I was sitting in the front by our driver, helping him stay awake, when a small car passed us on the left. It was full of college kids, they matched speed with us and started waving, so our driver honked. The car passed a little bit ahead, and I kid you not, the trunk opens and 2 naked guys wave from the trunk, and give us enthusiastic thumbs up. At full speed on the highway. So, 7 people crammed into a 1993 Honda Accord. My ex-husband is still a truck driver. When we were married I went on a haul with him that was supposed to be 4 days and turned into a week. But, during that week, we had 3 incidents that stuck with me forever. So, in his 40 years of driving, I'm sure he's seen much more, and much worse. The first accident, we had only made it 20 miles into the trip. A lady was merging onto the interstate, somehow got under a semi and it dragged the car, killing her. This may be TMI, but as my husband and I drove by, very slow, traffic was stop and go, we thought someone had hit a cow. It was devastating when we learned what we had just seen. The second accident was in the very steep hills of Maryland. Which BTW is absolutely gorgeous. I don't remember the details, but it involved 3 semis and when we got up to one of the semis, it was nothing but a black, smoking hull. I remember that one haunting me for quite a while, thinking about the poor driver trapped in there. The third situation involved us, and terrified me. We actually had to pull over for the night. The hills were like 7% grades, terribly steep. My husband was 22 and he was an excellent driver. I trusted him with my life, but he'd only been driving for about 6 months. I was 8 months pregnant. As we started down one of the hills, he was doing the brakes like he thought he was supposed to when over the CB another trucker told us we were on fire and we needed to just let off the brakes and take off, let them burn themselves out. At the bottom of the hill all I could see was this little hamlet. It was the longest, albeit fastest, trip down a hill I've ever taken, and I seriously have never been so terrified. I knew some child or family was going to come walking across the street and we weren't going to be able to stop, or we were going to go over the top of some cars, or I was going to die and not meet my new baby. We made it to the bottom, and I remember at some point my husband saying he was afraid we weren't going to have brakes, but we did. We pulled over in that town at the first place we found and parked for the night. We were both terribly shaken. A lot more happened on that trip. It was crazy considering it was only for 1 week. So, as I said, anyone that does this for a living could probably write a series on it.